so deeply honored to be here today, Veterans Day, the day our country sets aside to honor our nation's veterans. The design of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial was always meant to do just that. Remember and honor the veterans who served in the Vietnam War, and remember those who did not come back. It's hard to believe it's been 35 years since its dedication. Almost 37 years ago, I stood here for the first time, looking at this beautiful park. I had no idea what was to come over the next 2 years. I stood here and had a simple impulse to cut open the earth and to polish the earth's open sides. Now, to realize this design was not an easy journey. It was full of controversy and emotions on all sides. In 1982, at the wall's dedication, I was here, and at that time, I was met by a very angry, very emotional Vietnam veteran right here on the eve of the dedication. And as he raged at me, I could not help but to think how the pain and memories that that veteran was experiencing that made him lash out at me signified that the memorial was beginning to work. By creating a space that would allow a returning veteran to remember that time, and although those memories would at times be emotionally charged and at times painful, it is only when we can honestly face that loss and that pain that we can begin to overcome it. And that cathartic healing process that has become so much a part of the space was always at the heart of this design. I've been fortunate through the years to have received so many heartfelt thanks and letters from veterans, from family members who have lost a loved one, from a psychiatrist who helped veterans with PTSD, who wrote of how the final step of his therapy was to bring veterans to the wall. But it is I who need to thank all of you for your service and sacrifice. It has been a deeply moving experience for me. At the time, I must confess, it wasn't the easiest of projects. I too was the average age of a Vietnam service member. I was 21 going on 22. And though my battle and what we all went through to build this is nothing compared to what you endured, maybe it too was part of the story of the Vietnam War and its aftermath. I also want to acknowledge and give thanks to those who were instrumental in realizing this design. The small group of Vietnam veterans who worked so hard to set up the idea, to get congressional authorization, to hold the competition, and then to weather an incredible political firestorm to get it built. To Jan Scruggs, the founder of the VVMF, whose idea was to build a memorial, who was then aided by a small group of dedicated Vietnam veterans: Robert Dubeck, Ron Gibbs, Jack Wheeler, Colonel Don Shea, John Woods, some of whom are here today, and sadly for those who are not still with us. They fought so hard to help realize this design. And to Cooper Lecky, the architects of record, to Henry Arnold, the landscape architect who had originally designed this beautiful park in Constitution Gardens, to J. Carter Brown of the Fine Arts Commission, and so many commissioners who shepherded the project through the numerous planning meetings in DC, and to so many senators and congressmen, generals, veterans, Gold Star families, and volunteers who all made this memorial reality so that it can stand today and have the effect that it does on millions of visitors each year. It wasn't the easiest of designs to understand before it was built, since it connects to you in a very personal and psychological way. My task as the artist was to keep that design simple and pure, from the politics, from the controversy, from serious alterations, and for all the myriad design details that help make this design what it is today. I envisioned cutting open the earth and polishing the earth's open sides. The walls would not be massive, but instead thin and light, so that the names alone become the object, that the walls would be polished to a mirror shine, so you see yourself reflected in the names, and that the depth would be enough to offer you refuge, but not enough to become oppressive, that it had always to be of human scale, and that as you descend, the names rise up to meet you. And of utmost importance, that you would be able to find your time on the wall and connect with your fallen colleagues. I was intently focused on creating a work that would talk to each one of you individually, yet also to have you seen together as a whole, as a family, and to see yourself reflected in both the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial, so that you and your service would become a part of the very fabric of our country, so that you become an honored and storied part of our nation's history. I cannot imagine what you endured overseas, only to come home and not be welcomed home by the country that asked you to serve. I believe so strongly that the politics of that war had been so divisive that this memorial had to rise above that this memorial could not let the politics of the war color your service, your sacrifice, and your loss. We must never forget, ever, the heroism and sacrifice that you and your fellow veterans have made for our country. And if this memorial has helped to welcome you home and to help heal some of the turmoil and pain of that war, and to embrace you and honor you in our nation's capital, then I am deeply honored to have played my part in your story. Thank you.